All right. Champ, good to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. Great. Thanks for having me as well.
Absolutely. And I was looking at what Creative Ventures does, but I'd rather hear it from your perspective, as if we're having a drink with one another. How do you describe
sure.
what you do as a deep tech venture firm?
Yeah, so for creative, in early stage deep tech venture fund, investing in companies that addresses humanity most critical crisis, primarily in labor automation, climate change, and healthcare. And the way that I like to say that we distinguish ourselves from a lot of other deep tech fund is we care not about the technology. In fact, we almost don't care about technology. We care much more about the market and the problems that represent itself. So a lot of technologies will be technology in search of problems. There'll be some PhDs that come with the technology and have no idea how to actually apply it to the market. So our specialization is really understanding and looking at what problems are most critical and are most needing to solve, both from a humanity point of view, but also from an economics point of view, because we are a venture fund, and then we'll find the right technology and the right team to implement that.
Sure. Yep. Problems first, technology
Technology
second.
second. Yep.
Makes perfect sense. And I've got some questions on robotics as we get into this. But one thing that jumped out, I was researching your LinkedIn profile before I jumped into the interview, and I came across an article that you recently wrote in TechCrunch, and the article was titled, "Investment in construction automation is essential to rebuilding U.S. infrastructure." So that one jumped out at me, right? Construction automation, it's not always one of the first areas we come into.
Right.
So why is that the case? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, the construction industry is obviously extremely large. It's about 1.3 billion, 1.3 trillion in the U.S. But what's most striking is the number of labor shortages, which is
Yeah.
growing over the past 5-7 years since we're covering the industry. It used to be about 300,000 people under shortages, which correspond to about 10 billion in jobs, in basically salary not paid or that would otherwise be paid to these people. It's grown to about 500,000 post-pandemics. A lot of these guys, that works there, average age is about 57.
Yeah.
At this point, it's like 59, in the 60s, right? So pretty much beyond retirement age. And post-COVID, people just don't come back to the job site. So we basically have a lot of things to build, but no one really to build them. Construction is really hard, in the context of manufacturing. It is
Yeah.
almost like a perfect one-piece flow.
Yeah.
Things that you build, you kind of customize each of the building. There's no real systematized way to build the building. I mean, there's a construction process, but it's not like assembly line. You don't just pump out each building in the same way. How do you solve for that efficiently? When robotics is also very difficult to be applied. It's unconstrained environment. It's harsh environments. There's a lot of people on the job site. Robots. There's a lot of safety issues.
Yeah.
So that's an area that we look at. It's very lucrative. It's tens of billions. Not stealing anyone's jobs, just filling in the job posting at this point. And that's something that we're really excited about in that space, is how to solve for that.
Yeah, and that jumped out at me because, like I said before, I asked the question. Like, you don't always see construction in the
Right.
space when you're at, let's say, a robotics, automation, and AI conference like we are right now. I mean, what this is something that just came up, and I probably should have asked it before. What are some of the other, what you would describe as the biggest challenges that need solving right now that your company is invested in?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of them, right? Food service, jump out post pandemics. You go to restaurants, there's no workers as well. We've been invested in a company called Picnic Robotics, which is a pizza automation company that essentially, power all the big brands on the back of the kitchen, and they just couldn't find workers. Food service is very low margin. It's sort of like 3 to 5% per site, not very good. And 20% of it, 25% of it is just purely labor. And they couldn't find anyone. It's raised at thin margin. Wages are going up. They're being impacted by fast-growing industry like e-commerce that are raising up the wages. So it's what Amazon's now paying like $18-20 an hour. Pulling guys from these restaurant sectors, and they just don't have the same margin. They can't burn the same way as Amazon, right? So they need solutions to solve these labor challenges. The other one that we're looking at is harvesting, is agriculture harvesting.
Yeah.
Ag is difficult, because of seasonality. It's really difficult to find the right play, and we've been burned by ag before, so we're very well accustomed to that problem. Unlike most other industries that doesn't have seasonality issue, they use temp workers. There's 1/3 labor turnover each year, and it's really difficult to find problems in that space to solve. Indoor agriculture is very interesting. Mushroom is actually interestingly an area that I didn't know until like a month or two before. As I'm looking at a company called Tech Brew that we're considering an investment in. It is solving some really interesting problems. It's amazingly large market, but they don't have a seasonal issue that we usually find in other crops.
I feel like I've been in a mushroom plant
That's
before. Yeah,
interesting.
it's a pretty crazy operation. I couldn't tell you any of the specifics about it, but if I look at the things you've told me about so far, we started talking about construction. We talked about food and restaurants. We're talking agriculture. You're all like, I feel like when we'd have this conversation 5 years ago, we'd still be talking about like traditional factories and things like that. But we're really talking about new areas. These are pretty quick hit interviews, but I do want to get a question across to everyone in these conversations is where do you see robotics and automation going in the next 3 years?
Yeah, I'd say, let's wind back a little bit, right? Because then you kind of see different data points leading the trend. 10 years ago, robotics, you have robotics, dumb robotics, just doing very repetitive tasks, no intelligence. Then probably about, 5-7 years ago, AI started to come up. Deep mind started beating different Go players, chess player, and whatnot. Then suddenly, all right, let's apply AI and computer vision, primarily computer vision, really, into these dumb arms of the robots and have them do stuff. So now you have arms and eyes combined, and that's sort of the intelligence. And people tend to focus a lot on how startup has to learn a lot, iterate a lot, right? But these startups can't be without a customer. But the customer just takes a much longer time to learn. And you'd be surprised, that very, very, very few of these corporate customers have any notions of what metrics they actually want to see or need to see from the startup before they're comfortable deploying like hundreds and thousands of these robots on the ground. It just takes them longer to kind of learn. They're now coming up to the point where they've tried so many things, they've failed, they've learned, right? And everyone has to go through that journey. That's completely fine. But I believe that over the next couple of years, this is when the robots are going to scale. Because I've seen enough data points to be convinced that these customers have learned enough to start coming up with very, very pointed, 3 to 5 things that robots need to be able to do, and then they're going to scale. And that's a really critical piece of information for the industry to actually grow.
Yeah, no, scaling, I'm interested to see how the themes build up throughout these conversations, right? And you and I, before we started recording, we're talking about pilot purgatory, which is what a lot of people found themselves in. I feel like over the course of the past 5 to 10 years or so, trying all these new things. And as you said, people have tried enough things now that they've kind of learned from the things that have failed. And now we're going to start seeing scaling up, as you're saying. So it's an exciting time.
Yeah, very, very much. Very much.
Well, Champ, I appreciate you jumping on the show. Thanks for taking the time, and looking forward to seeing you throughout the event.
Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it. Cheers.